talk is about our experience of translating Flaubert's Parrot by Julian Barnes, but it touches upon some of the themes that have already been touched upon here. One is collaborative translations, because we're a husband and wife team, which sometimes happens, and this is a different kind of collaboration from the one that was discussed yesterday, but still it is a collaboration. Also, some of the technological issues that will be discussed later are also important, and the input of the author into a translation is something that was relevant for us. But what is important here is that as teachers of translation, we have a somewhat different perspective on some of the things that translators usually deal with.
And actually, we started our workshop in Moscow State University, that's us, 15 years ago, when we, it could be said that we started translating and teaching translation almost at the same time. So our teaching actually influenced ourselves very much. And we had, from the very start, we had to analyze everything we were doing, because we had to discuss it with the students. And we had to analyze their texts and sometimes some translations, existing translations, comparing them. So this analytical approach was there from the start. We just were forced into it. These our students, because we always go on with our work during summer, under less formal conditions. But our analytical work, I wouldn't say theoretical, is always, of course, descriptive, not prescriptive. We never try to impose on our students any of, at least we think so. But of course, when we do a team effort and we do translate, not just translate, but create books, we did several anthologies of crime fiction, not just Holmes, of Victorian story, and not The Butler, about 20s and 30s in British detective fiction. And here, of course, when it's team effort, we have to be consistent. We can't just allow everyone go his or her own way. And here, I'm afraid, we impose some of our own inclinations, because we are certainly for I wouldn't call it exactly foreignizing, but we certainly are for footnotes, endnotes, introductions, commentary, picture glossary. So we want to bring a lot of research into our work. And when we find in the text something difficult, something unknown, we don't sweep it under the carpet, but we say, oh, it's brilliant for our picture glossary, so let's let it stay in the text, and then we'll explain and probably have a picture of it. And so obviously this in this matter, our tastes probably influenced our students. But still there is one thing we warn them against. It's some very ready conceptions fixed in Soviet school, so-called Soviet school of literary translation. It's presumed to be brilliant, unsurpassed. And there are very good, brilliant translations. But as soon as our students do a lot of research in the history of Soviet translation, analyze a lot of work, we do it as well. We know better than many people that it's not so blameless as we now think from our times. And probably the threat we see is this concept of good Russian of translation at any cost. It should be good Russian. Any old school editor will tell you this. It should be good Russian, no matter what. Now, we don't object good Russian. We just don't want to pay a too high price for it. In this respect, we probably try to explain to our students that it shouldn't be done at any cost, this good Russian thing. For example, when you have in the original, you have this she said, he said, she said, he said, etc. And your editor would tell you, by all means, will tell you, no, it's good in English, but not in Russian. You should say, she replied, he exclaimed, she, more variety, no repetitions, that's that.
It's interesting, though, that what was said here is the direct opposite of what we hear in Russia. Because here we say, well, with Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, all these repetitions,
All of it
it's okay,
said to us,
but it's not
actually,
good English, so the editors don't like it. And we hear the exact opposite. You know, in English it's okay, it's normal for the English language, but not in Russian.
Because we have style, you know, in Russian.
So we'll give an illustration of what we mean by that, which is not from Julian Barnes, it's from Dorothy L. Sayers, fittingly for
Yeah, I
Oxford.
just want to say one thing before I come to the example. That what we think. Yeah, you can go the next slide. It can be read now. Actually. There were brilliant translations in Soviet times. There are brilliant translations now. But as for bad translations that also existed then and now, they are just two very different kinds of bad translations. And we'll now illustrate it with the example. Here is the phrase of Dorothy Sayers, where Lord Peter Wimsey is just introduced to the reading public. And
You don't have to look there.
well, you can read it.
Well, you can read it yourself.
Yeah, okay. But you can see that their actual image is somewhat unusual.
And here's what a Soviet school translator does with it.
Show it. It's good Russian, right?
Yeah.
Anybody wants to dispute that? It's good Russian.
And a different kind of problem is what we see when... Go ahead.
It's not a translator's mistake. It's not something translator didn't understand.
It's a translator's strategy.
It's an intention, it's strategy. We don't need this disgusting negative image when we speak about good guy. We don't want reader to have misconceptions. We want him to know straight away that we're talking about extremely good hero. Next one. And this more modern translation. I actually did some research in translations of Dorothy Sayers because of a project we're doing. Actually, she was out of the boundaries during Soviet times. She was absolutely not allowed to publish. It's interesting, I think. So now you can see what modern translator does. He tries hard with all the maggots, but it's certainly not very good Russian. It's awkward syntax and somewhat not very steady Russian phrase.
So our ambition is to translate everything that there is in the original text without stumbling and stuttering at every word.
Yes. And from this, we can actually go back to Julian Barnes.
And Julian Barnes, I think I don't have to explain who he is. He's one of the most famous contemporary British authors, and this is his late wife. And he's quite well represented in Russian from one of his first novels, The History of the World in 10.5 chapters, to his latest work. I think almost all of his corpus has been translated into Russian with varying degrees of success. The novel that we translated, or rather retranslated, because retranslation is another theme that recurs here from one of the previous sessions, was Flaubert's Parrot, which is a kind of almost a non-fiction work, even though there is a narrator who is not Barnes himself, who is one generation older and who is a doctor, a physician, with a difficult family history and so on, but who is also an amateur Flaubert scholar. And he writes mostly about Flaubert, about French literature, about Flaubert's surroundings, his love life, his creativity, and so on and so forth, which makes it an extremely difficult book to translate. So it was translated into Russian for the first time, I think, sometime around the year 2001. And it was the translation was done by a lady called Tatiana Shinkar, who also translated many other classics, including some classic novels by Ray Bradbury. So anyone who reads Bradbury in Russian should be warned. We admired Flaubert's Parrot for a very long time. It's a novel from 1984, so not a very new one. once we were talking to a friend of ours who happened to be an editor in a publishing house, and we said that we liked the novel very much and that the translation was hopeless. And sometime later he got back to us and asked us whether we would like to translate it again, and we said yes.
And actually here we spoke here about purposes of translation, intentions behind it. And of course we wanted to translate Barnes, of course. But actually we wanted to replace this translation as well. It's not really possible, but at least to have some other one. And again, the problem with this translation is that it's bad translation of the first kind. So if you do not know English and you're not very attentive, if you're not a very slow reader trying to really understand what is going on, then you glide upon the surface and it seems okay. It seems okay. It doesn't have awkward syntax. It's not suspicious with this, phrases when you can read through English through the Russian. In fact, sometimes you have no idea what was in the original at all. And it seems all right. And we're going to show you an example as a riddle. We'll show you a Russian phrase, which seems okay, and ask you to tell us what it is about.
What's going on? Yeah.
What's the meaning of it, what's going on.
And by the way, the parrot in the title is a stuffed parrot. So again, stuffed birds.
Speaking of taxidermy.
The book was translated into many languages, including, here you see, Romanian,
we'll come back to French translation later.
And French, okay. And so these are the Russian translations. And here is the riddle, yeah.
Please tell us what's it about.
The beginning refers to the fact that Flaubert identified himself as a bear. So the riddle here is the end of the passage.
What is it about? This phrase in fairly good Russian.
What's going on? Anyone has an idea, a suggestion?
Actually,
a guess?
Give us two readings.
If someone knows, don't say anything.
My lips are still.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right.
Spoil the
All right. Yes.
I honestly don't remember, so I think I have guessed. I was wondering about подобные моменты, красные мундиры, это месячные?
Yes.
Good guess.
It's
But if I was just reading it,
Anyone else here guessing that it's about period, about menstruation?
красные мундиры, that might, because I wouldn't be sure.
Okay.
Okay, so have a look what it looks like.
подобные моменты has no body preference whatsoever, so you try to...
Yeah, so you don't know what moments.
When I'm weird, and that would be...
Yeah. Okay, now you can see the original, which is absolutely transparent.
So basically the problem that the translator had here is to have the cas, which she didn't understand. She understood the cas as the cas, and not as the cas.
But she didn't stop here and think that it somehow sounds strange. And I think the majority of readers don't stop either. They just go on.
The irregularity was perceived as being untidy rather than,
Or being, rather
late,
than being
really.
late in the other sense.
But it's also because it's supposed to behave like a bear rather than большая женщина. Что она.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
By the way, the interesting thing here is about the phrase that Flaubert uses, because actually the redcoats have landed, is an English translation of what Flaubert actually says. He doesn't even say redcoats. He says, les Anglais sont arrivés. It's enough, because you know how they look.
So Barnes, in his translation of French, clarifies it by redcoats.
Okay, so this is our translation, doesn't matter. We kind of dealt. Another one. So this is this
Another
narrator who fought in the Second World War in the June operation in Normandy, and he goes back in his memory to those days, and he goes to those places which he remembers as a young soldier. This much we know. So what happens next? What is
going on? What is he doing?
We don't know.
We don't know. There's nothing of the kind in the original, so we absolutely don't know what the translator meant on this occasion. That's a tough one. Show the picture. I think we won't have an answer here.
So the first thing that we did was to look up what's a Mulberry Harbor, because maybe the British here know it, but we didn't. And this is one of the artificial harbors that were built for the invasion of the Allied forces, and the only one whose remains still exist. And this is what it looks like. So the dots and dashes here are
show the English version, because
these ones.
It will be
this is what
clearer.
it says.
That's what he sees. So when you have a picture, you understand what it means. So it has nothing to do, actually, with
also,
all the mysterious activities indicated in the
shags
translation.
that colonized the square borders were not bombs, were not hobos, they were birds.
Which would be strange in the open sea. A little bit difficult for them. I think we'll skip next one for time reasons. 10 minutes.
Yeah, what do I have next?
Okay.
Yeah, well, this is a tricky one.
This is a tough one, yes.
Please, basically here the narrator is very livid about critics who accuse Flaubert of mixing up the eye color of his heroine.
Actually, I think here we can go for English version directly, because obviously it's confused here, it's not so interesting. Let's go straight for English version.
Sure.
And see there a highlighted phrase. How do you understand it?
Have a second. A very long mistake. A very long.
Yeah, but this one phrase that is highlighted, it's about Eyes of Emma Bovary. And
basically, the problem that we had here is, as one of our students put this very concisely, can you escape this without implicating the lady's character, or without explaining or explicating the lady's character? And we asked different speakers of English, and they had different opinions about that. But finally...
we asked Julian Barnes, finally.
Asked Julian Barnes.
And it helped.
But look at what the previous translator did with that. Как же при этом не избежать целого рюкзака за плечами, набитого круглыми скобками, а в них заключено все о характере леди. So we went with... не взваливая на читателя ненужную поклажу подсказок насчет характера героини.
Next one.
Груз, you could just have груз.
Yeah,
I think we had груз one line in the nearest line. Another problem.
There is another bear surprise in this
exactly.
In this book, and
And
the problem here is that sometimes you have a quote and you go for existing classic Russian translation of the thing that's being quoted. And then you find that it's very difficult to use it because what the quote was for is not in the translation. Obviously, translating Flaubert or translating the quotes from Flaubert, which are many in this novel, we recourse to the existing translations, some of which are indeed classical in the Russian tradition. And in one case where...
Madame Bovary, it's Lyubimov, of course.
Nikolai Lyubimov, who was a translator of many things, Don Quixote and Madame Bovary, for example. And in this case, after all those discussions of how Flaubert was a bear and how much bear-like he was and so on and so forth, at one point, just out of the blue, he quotes a very famous sentence from Madame Bovary, which goes like this. So I give you the Barnes version and the original French. And we look into the Russian translation and there is no bear.
It's Собачий Vals, which wouldn't work for all this bear discussion.
So we had to retranslate it.
And don't forget...
Собачий Vals is plum, pom, plum, pom. It's something that a 3-year-old child
Three-year-old can play.
Yeah.
And it's a good solution, but it wouldn't work for our purposes. So we had to do without it.
And
say how we dealt with all the quotations.
We had to, since there were so many quotations from French, we had to check all of them against the original French, because sometimes we didn't want to trust Julian Barnes on his translation decisions, and sometimes we just wanted to recheck.
Sometimes something would work better in Russian than in English from original French.
But Barnes was quoting lots of very obscure Flauberian passages from his letters. Some of them were never translated into Russian and so on. So we were thinking, how can we tackle this problem? How can we trace all those quotes, sometimes without exact sources and so on? But then we thought of what is called a life hack or a cheat to go around that, and we ordered the French translation of Flauberts Parrot, Le Perroquet de Flaubert.
Because French translator had to do this work for us.
Hoping that the French translator has already done all this tedious job for us. And he has. This is a
but
translation
he says
by
thank you to Julian Barnes for providing him with the most obscure quotations. So he couldn't do it on his own as well.
Right. Another interesting thing was about the something that concerns the notes and comments that we had to add. And we were very grateful to the publishing house, to the publishers, and to the editor for going against the tradition of Russian publishing and not giving any footnotes, not even where we had phrases and sentences in French, Latin, and so on. It's very unusual for a Russian book, if there is a foreign sentence somewhere, you have to have a footnote. But we wanted it to be as close to the original as possible, and to be, to have this image of an intellectual literary work. So we put all that into endnotes, including translations of foreign phrases.
It's also, I want to repeat that we love footnotes, but Barnes obviously plays certain game with the reader, playing on British hatred for French and doing a lot of French inside his novel. And sometimes I think on purpose, he irritates his reader with all those quotes. So we actually didn't want to spoil his game. We wanted to make it all explained in the end, but give Barnes all his playfield.
And in one case, there is something that a parrot sitting in a cage on the Grand Canal is crying in the Venetian dialect, and nobody could understand what it was. Barnes didn't know. So he asked an Italian friend of his, who asked some Venetian friends, and they didn't know. But finally, they found a gondolier who provided a professional commentary saying that it's probably a usual catchphrase that we use, and it's different every year. So perhaps it was, just this, which was quite unusual and interesting.
Convincing.
Yes. Once, in one case, we went against our principles and made a domesticating rather than a foreignizing choice.
You have to break the rules to enjoy them.
Because Barnes' narrator discusses a writer who killed a squad of wolf cubs who would turn into Boy Scouts and fed them to the eels in his pond, and so on and so forth. And it went so well with Pionieri and Komsomolцы.
And it was absolutely abstract. It was not about certain country or something. It was pure fantasy. And really, even Krasные Галстуки were mentioned there. So we thought it would go really well with Pionieri and Komsomolцы.
But we asked Mr. Barnes' permission, and he kindly gave it to us. Given that there are many Russian references in the novel and in other novels of Julian Barnes.
Actually, we wouldn't do it if he didn't do a lot of Russian reference inside this work, too.
Another interesting problem was the problem of the blue color. As you know, Russian has 2 words for blue, and we had to choose when the narrator speaks about Provence.
And it's hard to choose.
It's hard to choose. Is it голубой or синий? Well, we went with Sini as well. Yeah.
Could be anything.
Could be both, but we went with Sini, but I'm still not sure.
Yeah, this is a funny story because at one point Barnes describes blunder, or rather a lecture about blunders in literature, errors in literature, given by an existing academic, where at one point this academic says that Yevtushenko made a horrible mistake writing about an American nightingale. And apparently the mistake was that there are no nightingales as such in America. But it was very hard for us to trace the actual poem where he says that, because, you know,
Incredibly difficult, not on the internet.
it's not on the internet, you know, we couldn't find it online. And finally, with the help of an online friend, we did trace it and we put it into our notes almost in its entirety. It's a rather corny poem, as many of Yevtushenko's poems are. And another funny thing was that the name of the person who provided us with this information was Voробey. So it all, you know, all those birds, parrots,
Yeah.
nightingales, sparrows coming together was also, you know, another humorous note, which I think was enjoyable for those who got to the notes. And yeah.
Well, to summarize, we must say that we very emphatically didn't want Barnes to appear as Russian writer to Russian audience, because he is not. And we also didn't want him sound as easy writer, because he is not. And we thought that we actually don't have to aim at broad readership, because what broad readership would read Julian Barnes? And we thought that people who read Barnes, people like ourselves who enjoy commentary, notes, riddles, would read our commentary with pleasure, and those who want easy read may read Dan Brown. So we actually prefer to stick to our principles, and we think we have a right to it, because certainly there can be another translation which would be more domesticating and enjoyable to the other readers.
Thank you.